Under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India has adopted a foreign policy that is both ambitious and complex. India's foreign policy is a high-wire act, a delicate balancing routine performed on the world stage. It requires careful maneuvering and precise execution to avoid a misstep. India is projecting itself as a resurgent Vishwaguru, a global leader and knowledge hub, drawing upon its rich history and cultural heritage to assert its influence. All this while navigating the world's shifting power blocks, carefully assessing the evolving geopolitical landscape, and adapting its strategies accordingly. This requires a keen understanding of international relations and a proactive approach to diplomacy. India deepens ties with the US and the West, forging strategic partnerships and strengthening economic cooperation. This alignment is driven by shared values and mutual interests, particularly in areas such as technology, defense, and trade. Yet, India simultaneously champions the Global South through BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, advocating for the interests of developing nations and promoting a more multipolar world order. This commitment reflects India's historical ties to the non-aligned movement and its desire to be a voice for the marginalized. This dual approach aims to position India as a bridge between the global North and South, facilitating dialogue and cooperation across different regions and ideologies. India seeks to play a constructive role in addressing global challenges and fostering a more inclusive and equitable international system. But it's fraught with contradictions, requiring careful management to avoid alienating key partners or undermining its own strategic objectives. The inherent tensions between these different alignments pose significant challenges for Indian diplomacy. India joins the Quad to counter China's growing assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific region, strengthening its maritime security and promoting a rules-based order. This alliance reflects India's concerns about China's territorial ambitions and its commitment to safeguarding its strategic interests. Yet India simultaneously sits with China and Russia in forums that challenge the Western order, engaging in dialogue and cooperation on issues of mutual concern. This engagement reflects India's belief in the importance of multilateralism and its desire to avoid being drawn into a zero-sum game between competing power blocks. The risk: strategic incoherence. A lack of clarity and consistency in its foreign policy could undermine India's credibility and effectiveness on the world stage. Actions in one sphere can undermine trust in another, leaving partners questioning India's loyalties and its long-term strategic vision. This can lead to uncertainty and hesitation in forging deeper partnerships with India. As the world fractures into competing blocs driven by geopolitical rivalries and ideological differences, the space for India's multi-alignment is shrinking, making it increasingly difficult to maintain equidistance between competing powers. The room for maneuver is diminishing as the pressure to choose sides intensifies. The pressure to choose sides is mounting, forcing India to confront difficult choices and reassess its strategic priorities. The need for clarity and decisiveness is becoming increasingly urgent, and India's balancing act is being tested as never before, pushing its diplomatic capabilities to the limit. The stakes are high and the consequences of miscalculation could be significant. In this video we'll explore how India's foreign policy faces a critical crossroads, examining the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. We will analyze the key factors shaping India's strategic choices and assess the potential implications for its future role in the world. One that may soon force a decisive choice, one that will define its place in the evolving global order. The decisions made in the coming years will have far-reaching consequences for India's security, prosperity, and influence. Modi's government casts India as a leader of the Global South, using BRICS as its main stage. India wants BRICS to bridge the Global South and North, but China's dominance overshadows this vision. Beijing's economic and technological power shapes the bloc's agenda, making India's leadership claims more aspirational than real. India's deepening ties with the US also undermine its credibility as a true voice for the Global South. Many developing nations see India's dual-track approach as opportunistic, eroding trust within BRICS. China and Russia push for alternatives to the Western order, while India tries to moderate the bloc's anti-Western tilt, often leaving it caught in the middle. The result: India struggles to satisfy either its BRICS partners or its Western allies. India's diplomatic tightrope walk is becoming increasingly complex. Navigating the intricate web of international relations requires a delicate balance, especially as the global landscape undergoes rapid transformation. This balancing act is complicated by a new global order, one where traditional alliances are being challenged and new power dynamics are emerging. The old certainties are fading, giving rise to a more fragmented and unpredictable world stage. This new order is split between US-led geopolitics, a system that has historically emphasized military strength and strategic alliances, and the rising influence of China-Russia geoeconomics, which prioritizes economic integration and infrastructure development as tools of influence. The US system prioritizes military alliances and security, viewing these as essential for maintaining stability and deterring aggression. This approach often involves projecting power through military presence and strategic partnerships. It is also pushing for deglobalization and friendshoring, aiming to reduce reliance on potential adversaries and strengthen economic ties with trusted allies. This involves reshaping supply chains and promoting domestic manufacturing. China and Russia, meanwhile, champion economic integration and multipolarity, advocating for a world order with multiple centers of power and influence. They are using tools like the Belt and Road Initiative, a massive infrastructure project aimed at connecting Asia, Africa, and Europe through a network of roads, railways, and ports, and BRICS, a group of emerging economies seeking to challenge the dominance of Western-led institutions and promote alternative models of development. India's security concerns with China, particularly along their disputed border, push it toward closer cooperation with the US as a counterweight to China's growing power. But its development needs and multipolar ambitions, along with its historical commitment to non-alignment, pull it toward the geoeconomic camp, where it can pursue its economic interests and maintain strategic autonomy. Engaging with both offers benefits, allowing India to tap into diverse markets, secure access to vital resources, and amplify its voice as a leader of the developing world. But this balancing act also deepens India's dilemma, forcing it to make difficult choices and navigate conflicting priorities. India is caught between two systems, each with its own set of rules, values, and strategic objectives. It finds itself unable to fully commit to either, constantly calibrating its position to maximize its advantages and minimize its risks. The world's new fault lines are forcing India to choose, or at least lean more decisively in one direction. Will it prioritize security with the West, strengthening its alliances and focusing on deterring threats, or will it prioritize economic opportunity with the East, deepening its trade ties and embracing a more multipolar world order? The balancing act is becoming unsustainable, and India will need to make some tough decisions in the years ahead to secure its place in the evolving global landscape. The Russia-India-China, RAIC trilateral is a case study in India's tactical, not strategic foreign policy. India uses RAIC as a diplomatic safety valve after crises with China, with Russia as a buffer. But India avoids institutionalizing RAIC, wary of being pulled into a bloc dominated by the Sino-Russian axis. A deeper RAIC would undermine India's credibility with the US and the Quad. Russia and China want a stronger RAIC to counter the West, but India resists, keeping the grouping at arm's length. This approach is harder to sustain as Moscow and Beijing increase pressure for deeper engagement. India must constantly find new ways to avoid full commitment without alienating Russia. The cost of this tactical flexibility is rising. India now faces coordinated pressure, a multifaceted challenge that requires careful navigation. This pressure isn't coming from just one direction. It's a concerted effort to influence India's foreign policy decisions and strategic alliances. From Russia and China, two global powers increasingly aligned in their geopolitical objectives. Their partnership presents a formidable force on the world stage, and their combined influence is being brought to bear on India, to align more closely with their vision of a multipolar world. This vision challenges the existing global order and seeks to establish a new balance of power, one where multiple centers of influence coexist and compete. At summits like the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, these nations actively promote their agenda and seek to expand their sphere of influence. The SCO serves as a platform for collaboration and coordination on security, economic, and political matters. And the upcoming BRICS presidency, India will find itself at the center of intense diplomatic maneuvering. The BRICS nations represent a significant portion of the global economy, and their collective decisions carry considerable weight. India is being tested to pick a side, or at least to demonstrate a clear alignment in its strategic priorities. This pressure to choose is a direct challenge to India's long-standing policy of non-alignment and strategic autonomy. Russia, isolated from the West due to sanctions and geopolitical tensions, is actively seeking new partnerships and alliances to counter its isolation. This eastward pivot is a key element of its foreign policy strategy. pushes for a stronger RAIC, the Russia-India-China trilateral, as a counterweight to Western influence. This trilateral framework aims to foster cooperation and coordination on a range of issues, from security to trade, to legitimize its pivot east, seeking to establish itself as a key player in the Asian geopolitical landscape. This pivot is driven by both economic necessity and strategic considerations. China sees an opportunity in the current geopolitical climate to advance its own interests and reshape the global order in its favor. This involves a combination of economic, diplomatic, and military initiatives. To weaken the Quad, the security alliance between the United States, India, Japan, and Australia, which is seen as a counter to China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific region, and pull India out of the U.S. orbit, diminishing the strategic partnership between the two countries. This is a long-term objective that China pursues through various means, including economic incentives and diplomatic pressure. Both use their influence within international organizations and multilateral forums to advance their respective agendas and exert pressure on other nations. In these organizations, leveraging their positions to shape the narrative and influence decision-making processes. This includes promoting their preferred policies and challenging those that run counter to their interests. To force India's hand, to push it towards decisions that align with their strategic goals, even if those decisions are not necessarily in India's best interests. Pushing anti-Western agendas, seeking to undermine the influence of the United States and its allies in global affairs. This involves promoting alternative models of development and governance, and proposing new members to these organizations, strategically expanding their influence and altering the balance of power within these institutions. To complicate India's position, making it more difficult for India to navigate the complex web of international relations and maintain its strategic autonomy. The looming BRICS presidency in 2026 presents both opportunities and challenges for India, as it will be responsible for setting the agenda and guiding the direction of the organization. Will be a key test of India's diplomatic skills and its ability to balance its competing interests in a rapidly changing world, with China and Russia likely to coordinate their efforts to advance their shared objectives within the BRICS framework, likely to push initiatives that could potentially undermine India's strategic interest and challenge its established partnerships. That challenge India's balancing act, forcing it to make difficult choices and potentially alienate key allies. The most contentious, the issue that is likely to generate the most friction and disagreement, the possible inclusion of Pakistan in BRICS, a move that would significantly alter the dynamics of the organization, a move designed to corner India, placing it in a difficult position and potentially isolating it within the BRICS framework. India's multi-alignment strategy, its policy of maintaining partnerships with a diverse range of countries, is under unprecedented strain as the pressure to choose sides intensifies and the geopolitical landscape becomes increasingly polarized. China's overwhelming presence in BRICS and the SCO fundamentally limits India's ambitions. China sets the agenda, using its economic and technological power to shape these organizations. India's vision of BRICS as a bridge is at odds with China's push for a parallel global order. India's initiatives like digital payments struggle to compete with China's established systems. Within the SCO, India's security concerns are sidelined, especially given China's close ties with Pakistan. India is often forced into a defensive posture, blocking initiatives rather than advancing its own. The dream of leading the global south is colliding with the reality of Chinese hegemony. India's role is increasingly reactive, not proactive, a frustrating position for a rising power. The question of BRICS expansion, especially Pakistan's possible entry, exposes India's strategic vulnerability. China, backed by Russia, supports Pakistan's inclusion to dilute India's influence and import South Asian rivalries into BRICS. If India vetoes Pakistan, it risks being labeled obstructionist. If it agrees, it legitimizes its rival and loses leverage. Either choice weakens India's position and turns BRICS into another battleground with Pakistan. China can use this dilemma to maximize pressure on New Delhi at a time of its choosing. As India prepares for its 2026 presidency, it faces a test of its diplomatic skill and coalition building. Without a clear strategy, India risks being outmaneuvered in a club it once hoped to co-lead. As of July 18, 2025, India's multi-alignment strategy is reaching its limits. The world's power blocks are drifting apart, and India's attempt to straddle both is becoming untenable. Western partners distrust India's ties with Russia and China. BRICS partners question its commitment when it aligns with the US-China's dominance in non-Western institutions blocks India's ambitions to lead the global south. The looming threat of Pakistan's BRICS entry highlights India's vulnerability. India must now reassess its long-term interests and make a strategic choice: deepen ties with the democratic West or accommodate China's rise and risk its autonomy. The era of comfortable non-alignment is over. The time for a coherent strategic decision has arrived.